Welcome in to another episode of Frogs Insider. I am Jamie Plunkett here as always with Melissa Treewasser. We are sponsored in part by Hell's Half Acre Sporting Goods and Home Field Apparel. So shout out to both of them right off of the rip tonight. We're very thankful for both of those partnerships. And we're also super thankful for you, the listener. We've been growing this show very quickly over the last 6 months-ish, since March, middle of March, end of March. Very thankful for everybody that's tuned in, that have subscribed to the YouTube channel, that have left us a rating and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Most of them, if not all of them, are glowing at this point. So thank you. And if you haven't done so yet, go ahead and subscribe. Leave us a review. Comment below on this video if you're watching us on YouTube and tell us how much you like the backgrounds in our respective home offices.
I got pretty good. Yeah.
I got to close my closet. I just realized that I've accidentally left that door open. Everybody can see where I just shove all of the extra boxes that I haven't looked at in years. But
yeah, we all have one of those.
I'll just like Photoshop it out or something. But so we got a couple things to cover on this episode, Melissa, talking about TCU putting one in the win column for the first time this year, which is always a good thing. When you get a win as a football team, doesn't matter who you're playing. Going to break that down a little bit. We're going to break down some college basketball news from the day. We're not going to be talking about Mel Tucker outside of this one sentence.
Yeah,
because that's beyond the scope of this podcast. So we're just going to let that be what it is and let that thing sort itself out. I've gotten multiple texts about that today. So we're just going to say that here and we'll let that thing do what it does. We'll
be thankful we're not Michigan State right now.
Yeah. And most importantly, though, Melissa, as we transition away from Mel Tucker, we need a Trubies update. I know that you just told me before we started recording that things are a little bumpy right now.
Yeah.
First year program, there are going to be some bumps and bruises along the way. But give us a general update.
So we came out, we had our first game of the season last Tuesday. As I know you guys are all aware. You've been anxiously awaiting this update. We had an incredible come from behind win. So down 15-6 at the half or 15-7 at the half, come back, win 21-14. It was awesome. I don't think the math works out on that, but something like that. We did win 21-14. How we got there, who knows? But unlike TCU against Colorado, we needed a drive to win it, to take the lead, got it, and we needed a stop to seal it. We did, and I got my first ever Gatorade bath, and that was pretty cool. So it was a great way to start the season. And then we went and faced our big rival, who is currently ranked in the top 20 in the state and number 5 in the section, and had played 11 games, and it was our second game. And you can imagine that things went about as you could imagine that they went. So it was a rough day for the offense, rough day for the defense. Didn't come away with the dub, but not a league game. So we're moving on, Jamie. It's a learning opportunity in game number 2 of the season. We got another big one probably today, as you guys are listening to this on Tuesday this week, a league game. Here's the fun part. I feel like kind of 2015 TCU here. I'm down 7 players, maybe 8. Yeah, 7.5, 8. 5 of them are starters. I've got 3 starters out on defense. I've got my starting quarterback and my future all-conference wide receiver out on offense. 4 of them are on retreat. I've got my another one of my receivers, my backup setter, also on retreat. And then we had 2 kids go head-to-head and concuss themselves in this non-contact sport in our second game.
Listen, we got to talk to that strength and conditioning coach. We got to get these kids right.
Yeah,
these kids right.
It's been tough. So we had another kid she's also a wrestler. She tweaked her knee in a wrestling tournament this weekend, so she's a maybe. So we're falling apart at the seams. We're bringing a freshman up to varsity for the week as a fill-in, so that'll be fun for her, maybe not for us. But we're gonna, someone's got to step up. So we'll see how it goes the next 2 days, the next 2 games. We got a big week. I told the kids just the job is to go 1-0 twice, right?
There you go.
And if we can get a split, we're be in really good shape for the league. That's the goal right now. But I think we can get it done. We got a home game tomorrow, home game Tuesday. That's a good home field advantage. It's hot, so I think that helps us. So we'll see. Well, you guys just, thoughts and prayers to the Trubies. We need some extra love and support this week.
Listen, as the saying goes, next woman up. Next woman up. Well, we saw a little bit of next man up for TCU on Saturday against Nicholls. FCS opponent. There were a couple folks who did not get as many reps. There were a couple guys that were in street clothes, kind of as a precautionary thing for the Frogs as well, specifically at the wide receiver position. We'll get into that in a moment. But Melissa, TCU wins 41-6. They get over 440 yards of offense. They put up, 41 points. And on the surface, you say, okay, they won an FCS game by 35 points. They did what they needed to do. A lot of young guys got reps, but I don't know how you felt at the end of the game. I felt like it was not nearly as clean of a performance as we would have liked to have seen when you're talking about the competition level that TCU was playing on Saturday night. Am I off base there, or are you kind of with me there?
No, I'm completely on the same page as you in that regard. TCU's first score came on a block punt, which is a really nice special teams play. The offense really struggled early to get in a rhythm, to kind of, and you mentioned there were some guys out, and we're going to touch on this, but Savion Williams didn't really play. JP Richardson played, I think, one snap, or had one catch at least, and was, they kind of kept him out. He got banged up a little bit, they said. So they were missing, two guys that, Chandler's probably got a decent rhythm with, but it's, it felt like the same thing that we said the week prior, is that TCU's offense got the job done, but it didn't feel like there was ever really a rhythm. This was not a team that was playing with a lot of juice. Can I steal from our friends at Purple Theory podcast and just say the vibes were kind of off?
I think you can, and that's not in so many words. The first question I asked Sonny Dykes after the game on Saturday night was, he was very critical of TCU's energy and effort in week one. So obviously the first question in week two is, how did you feel about the energy and effort this week compared to week one? And he was pretty honest. Again, you could tell that he was still not pleased with how his team had been playing through the first 2 weeks of the season. And he said that he thought it was better, but that there were still too many mistakes, that they still weren't making the right decisions at times. And he finished off his answer with saying, if this is how we're going to play football this year, we're not going to win many games in the Big 12. And so he understood coming out of that game that there is still a lot of room for improvement on both sides of the football for this team. You mentioned it already. Special teams, I think, has done a very good job through 2 weeks. They blocked a field goal in week one. They had a long kickoff return by Major Everhart. A couple good punt returns in this game against Nicholls. Like you mentioned, the block punt for a touchdown.
57-yard field goal.
Yeah, 57-yard field goal from Griffin Kell,
awesome.
which is a career long for him. Good to see him get back on the horse after missing a field goal in week one. So ultimately, outside of one missed field goal from Kell, special teams has probably been the most consistently good unit that we've seen through 2 weeks from this football team. Offensively, like you said, they struggled early, which was concerning against an FCS opponent. But I think the biggest concern for me was, and I'm going to get into some of the positives here in a second too, because there were definitely some positive takeaways from this football game. The biggest concern for me, I think, offensively was the play of the offensive line. I mean, we can just be very honest here for a moment. The left side of the offensive line really struggled on Saturday night. Andrew Coker got beat by his man a couple different times. That's a little bit of a concern.
Had a couple of false starts too, correct?
He had one. Brandon Coleman got called for a holding penalty that pulled back a huge run from Imani Bailey. It would have been the longest run of the night. That got called back because of a holding penalty on Brandon Coleman. There were multiple times where Morris got flushed out of the pocket when he dropped back to pass. And frankly, the run game was pretty not great on Saturday night. They averaged 3.5 yards a carry, and that's with Chandler Morris averaging 10 yards a carry. And Chandler had 61 rushing yards. The whole team had, I think, 128, 129. So you take Chandler Morris out of the rushing equation, which isn't totally fair to do, but for the purpose of this, you had Imani Bailey, who had 3.5 yards rushing on 19 carries. And then you had Trey Sanders, who had 13 yards on 5 carries. And then 3 more guys who were not Chandler Morris had at least one rushing attempt, but they all finished with negative rushing yards on the night. And that is a very interesting development from week 1 to week 2, when TCU ran the ball very effectively, over 7 yards a carry against Colorado, to not even muster half of that against Nicholls is, I think, a point of concern at this point in the season when you're going to face a lot better defensive fronts pretty much from here on out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of explains too why the rhythm was so off for this offensive unit as a whole. When the line isn't getting the job done up front, it sets the timing off on everything. And I think we did see, a very vanilla, kind of playbook, obviously against an FCS opponent. But once again, the first score of the game comes off of a block punt. The second score comes off of a long Chandler run. We all wanted to see Chandler Morris run more in week 1, but he had to run far too much in week 2 against an FCS opponent. And so I think it's a new offensive coordinator. You have a ton of new players on that side of the ball. You have a lot of transfers. You would like everything to kind of feel locked in by the time you get to opening week, but there is a reason, there's a built-in excuse, I suppose, for things not quite clicking yet, but there's not a whole lot of time to get them clicking. Houston, we'll talk about them later and their, week 2. But after that, you've got SMU, and then you get really hot and heavy to that Big 12 schedule. And, we've even seen the bottom of the barrel teams cause some teams problems. Cincinnati had a great win this past weekend. There's not going to be a lot of walkover wins in this conference this year. It's pretty even, especially when you look at, kind of those middle tier teams seem to all kind of have the same strengths and weaknesses. So it's very concerning to see the running game get shut down by an FCS opponent. It's very concerning to see the offensive line look subpar against an FCS opponent. And it's very concerning that there just might not be a lot of leadership on this team if we're 2 weeks into this thing and we still aren't seeing them kind of get up for these games, regardless of opponent. They've had 2 games at home. You should be able to get up for the opportunity to play college football. You don't get many of those opportunities in the season.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, you lose a lot of vocal guys off of last year's roster, right? I mean, Trey Hodges Tomlinson was a vocal leader on the defense. So was D Winters. You're losing Max Duggan, who's one of the most vocal guys in the locker room on offense. You're losing Quentin Johnston, who was a vocal leader. You're losing Steve Avila and Alana Lee, who were veteran leaders as well. And obviously, there's going to be a void that needs to be filled. We think that there are guys who are capable of doing that on this roster, right? I mean, you've got Chandler Morris, who's been in the program for 3 years. He knows a lot of these guys incredibly well. Josh Newton has been well documented as a vocal leader on the defensive side of the ball, as has Johnny Hodges. It's a matter of, I think it's a matter of not getting too tough on one another. It's a matter of just stepping up and trying to bring that energy in a different way. Because as far as an energy standpoint is concerned, it definitely hasn't met the standard the first 2 weeks of the season. Defensively, I think it's always nice when you don't let an opponent score a touchdown.
Sure. That's
right. That's always a good thing.
Regardless of opponent. Yeah.
So 6 points on the board for Nicholls. They didn't get in the end zone. That's a win for this defense. I thought the tackling still has room to improve, but it looked much better than it did in week 1. There were a couple guys who were still kind of diving at ankles that's got to get cleaned up.
Yeah.
But the tackling looked much more sound. Secondary play was much more sound. There still was not a ton of pressure on the quarterback, though.
Yeah.
There were 3 sacks total and 4 quarterback hurries. And on the surface, you think, those are decent numbers. But the first sack came from Dom Williams in the first quarter. And then the next 2 sacks didn't come until the final drive of the game for Nicholls. And, you have a whole 3 quarters essentially where you don't get a ton of pressure on the quarterback. You don't sack him at least. And you're only getting 4 quarterback hurries over that time span as well. And we saw that on one of Nicholls' field goal drives in the second half, where there was no pressure on the quarterback. He had 5 or 6 seconds to drop back and look around, and they converted 3 third and longs of 9 or more yards on that drive. And
same thing that reared its ugly head in week 1, which is so concerning.
And so, when you're committed to only rushing 3, those 3 guys have to be capable of getting to the quarterback. We haven't seen that from this defensive line yet. So we'll see how that develops. Again, you've got another week of trying to figure some stuff out to get creative on defense to get some pressure on the quarterback, because Houston's a team that can put up some decent points. They scored 38 in week 2. They got a win in week 1 against a pretty defensively sound UTSA program. you're the competition level, regardless of what you think of Houston, steps up this week.
Yeah.
And so defensively, you've got to be able to game plan a little bit, and we'll see how that goes. I do want to mention too, because I thought Chandler had a really good game on
Yeah.
Saturday, 26 of 30 passing. Like you mentioned, he ran 5 times for 61 yards, had a rushing touchdown, had a couple passing touchdowns, did not turn the ball over. Right. So that's always a good thing. And he said that was a point of emphasis for him this week, was to focus on ball protection a little bit more. We can talk about Josh Hoover and his 2
Yeah.
turnovers, but fresh
That was so bad.
a little couple nerves there from the guy who hadn't seen any playing time yet. I can kind of understand it, and he
Sure.
got those out
Yeah.
of the way and made a really good pass later in his time out there on the field as well for a touchdown. But I thought Chandler had a pretty good game. As far as the play calling was concerned, he was executing the plays really, really well. Right, he was getting the ball out on time. He was accurate with his throws. He ran when he needed to. I think he's gaining confidence in the run game again after coming off that leg injury last year.
Yeah.
He took a big hit in the run game and popped back up. So I think that kind of maybe clears your head as a football player once you get hit and you get back up and you kind of analyze. And you say, "Oh, I'm good. Okay, now let's get to the next rep and let's do that again." I would like to see the ball get pushed downfield more. I think he had 1 or 2 opportunities where he maybe missed a guy downfield that was open, but that's kind of picking at nits for the purposes of this game. But I thought overall Chandler showed some pretty good improvement from week 1 to week 2, and so that's something to build on for sure as well.
Yeah, I think we saw his accuracy, right, on some of those routes. Like, again, he wasn't necessarily pushing the ball down the field, but he threw the short and the intermediate routes, I thought, a lot more cleanly. And again, you would expect that against a lower level, lower tier opponent. Yeah. He didn't have to worry about Travis Hunter in the defensive secondary. That helps everything feel a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, it's, you titled the segment, "What can you learn from an FCS opponent?" And I think that's basically the thing, right? Is, did they look better than they did against Colorado? Sure. Did we get a little redemption by Colorado coming out and stomping on Nebraska a little bit? Yeah, maybe. But at the end of the day, all they did this week was do their job, right? Yep. TCU did what it needed to do against an FCS opponent, got young guys some reps. They put 40 plus on the board. They didn't allow the offense to score a touchdown against them. It's over. It's done. Wipe it away. Take the positives, but you still understand that what has been done is not enough to, go out and win a Big 12 conference title this year. They still have a lot of work to do, and it'll be up to that team to take on a challenge in the week ahead. Houston has its own problems, certainly. And I don't know that TCU will be able to fully exploit some of their weaknesses, but their job is to go down and ruin that Houston homecoming and take care of business against an opponent that's certainly better than the opponent they played this week, and maybe not even as good as Colorado, but that's going to be really, really charged up. If TCU is not ready for this one, Houston absolutely will be super, super charged up for this game. Even if I heard today that they have not sold this one out yet, which is absolutely shocking to me. But I guess that happens when you lose tries.
Maybe so. Yeah. Maybe there's a little bit of dissatisfaction, if you will, among the Houston fan base right now. But they are coming up on their first Big 12 conference game
ever.
And that's a big deal. I'm sure that stadium, the fans that are there are going to be into it, and it's the first road test for this version of TCU's football program. I'm very intrigued by how all of that goes. I know that you sat down with Go Cougs to talk a little bit more about that game. That's going to drop later this week. But Melissa, before we kind of move on from this and talk about some Pro Frogs and stuff, I do want to shout out one of our sponsors, Hell's Half Acre, who is a brand that was created with Horned Frog fans in mind, and each item that they sell makes a direct impact on TCU student athletes. You can actually see, I don't have it. Never mind. I'm gonna pivot away from what I was about to do. But you can go to hellshalfacresg.com and check out all of their apparel, all of their tailgating goods, and get prepped for game day the perfect way. From polos to shirts to headwear to home goods, they've got everything you need to make sure that you're ready. I talked about it last episode and a couple episodes before. The game day polo that they have for football this year is elite. It's such a good looking polo. Go out and get it if you haven't gotten it yet. I think they've still got it in stock. hellshalfacre.com, hellshalfacresg.com. Go grab everything you need for TCU football game day. Very thankful for them. to sponsor the pod.
We have truly the greatest sponsors, and we appreciate you guys helping us by supporting them. Hell's Half Acre is a local brand, a local company, a good dude. We're super excited to be partnering up with them. Speaking of super exciting, we are a college football podcast and we love college football, but a little league called the NFL got kicked off this weekend as well. And I will say why not many of the football games were all of that good. There were a couple of TCU players that had some really, really nice weekends. And I was down in the Bay Area. So I did not get to pay as much of attention to TCU's game the first half as I would have liked, because I was trying to convince a 2.5-year-old to watch football with me. Now, I will say we did master the full Go Frogs. This has been a year-long process. She got the Go Frog. She's pretty much got the hand side. She does it better than most people, at least at this point. So I'm pretty proud of my influence there. But I did get to listen to quite a bit of NFL on my drive back. One of the coolest things was the Los Angeles Rams went up to Seattle, and 2 of their 5 starting offensive linemen were TCU guys, and that was pretty freaking cool. Joe Noteboom and Steve Avila got the start for the Rams in a big win at the Seahawks. I thought that was awesome. The other guys down in LA had a little bit of a quieter debut. QJ had 2 catches for 9 yards on 3 targets. Darius Davis actually got a catch before Quentin Johnston. He finished with 1 catch for 5 yards. And I was so bummed that I didn't get to watch that game. It was not, I didn't pay for Sunday ticket, and I'm regretting it because it looked like such a fun game, but the bonus coverage, like a back and forth, really good game between the Dolphins and the Chargers. That unfortunately for the TCU guys went the Dolphins' way. Kendra Miller didn't play. He's banged up right now, which is a bummer as well, because he's got a good opportunity with Alvin Kamara out Jamal. I can't remember the guy that they signed who's really into Pokemon, and he's just Williams, thank you. Had a big game for the Saints. We hope he gets back on the field. So a lot of TCU guys out there, a lot of TCU guys on rosters, handful of TCU guys on practice squads. I forgot to check, because I should be not amazed that Amari DeMarcado made a team too. I'm not sure if he got a lot of run with the Cardinals. They had a nice little win too to open up the season, which is pretty cool.
They did. They're ruining their Caleb Williams sweepstakes just right out of the gate. It's pretty
right out of the gate. So he did not get any carries for the Cardinals, but they did get the W. So, or no, they did. They lost. That's right. They were.
Oh, the Commanders ended up winning. There you go.
Yeah, and again, nobody cares other than Amari DeMarcado being on one of those teams. So, really great to see those guys. It's got to be a pretty cool moment to walk out for your first regular season game. Quentin, I'm sure, is going to have a big season. I think as Justin Herbert gets more comfortable with him, he'll be a bigger part of that Chargers offense. They need to do something because they really struggled down the stretch. So
it's true. And it's getting more and more fun to have Pro Frogs be like a year-round thing, not just an NFL season thing. So when basketball kicks up here in a little bit and we're watching Desmond Bain and Kenrich Williams get after it, and now Mike Miles with the Mavericks, it's going to be a lot of fun. And obviously baseball is rolling right now. There are a lot of Pro Frogs playing baseball right now, and the NWSL is going. There's some Pro Frogs and NWSL. Really cool. Messiah Bright's probably going to win Rookie of the Year in that league.
So cool.
Just really fun to keep track of where all these frogs are going and what they're doing post TCU, because it's always cool just to support those folks in the fold, and then also to see them come back on campus and support the current student athletes the way a lot of them do is also really neat and fun to see.
Yeah, Des was out there for game 1 as part of the basketball reunion weekend. Bauer had a lot of opinions on it. It's funny because the dog started barking because he saw the Aflac commercial. He's really into ducks, I guess, or maybe Deion Sanders or Nick Saban. I don't know.
Hey, a lot of people are into those last 2 guys. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of a nice thank you, Bauer, for the segue into talking about some big games across the country, because all the talk was Deion Sanders is hot and Nick Saban maybe not.
I'm going to clip you saying Deion Sanders is hot and just use that as an audio drop for the rest of the year.
Here's the thing. Like, I had the biggest crush on Deion Sanders as a kid. Like, I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast, but I had 3 posters up in my room as a kid.
From the time of being a 49er?
Well, yeah. Well, no, I liked him from the time he was a Falcon. Like I go back to like when he was in college, I knew who he was, and then
There
when he
you
came
go.
to the Niners, it was like a dream come true. I have it somewhere. His Falcons and his Braves rookie card. Like I have both of those
Nice.
somewhere buried in a box.
You got to get those things signed
I
and
know. I
plaqued up and
I really
hold
wanted to
on to those
go.
suckers.
Yeah, I really wanted to go to his press conference last week, but then I felt guilty because I was like, yeah, TCU lost. I feel like I need to be in the TCU presser, but I really wanted to go hear Dion, and I'm sad I missed it. But no, I had Michael Jackson, which didn't go well.
That one didn't turn out
Madonna,
well.
yeah, Madonna also did not really go
Yikes.
particularly well. And then Deion Sanders, like those were my favorite, like those were my like the famous people that I like looked up to or
Look,
worshipped or whatever as a kid.
1 for 3 is not bad.
1 for 3 is not
That
bad.
was if that was a batting average, you'd be in the Hall of Fame. So,
That's so true. So true. And maybe a
um,
home run. Maybe hit a home run with Dion because man, like we all kind of like poo-pooed on TCU and for good reason in week 1, but Colorado, Nebraska was iffy, but Colorado put up a lot of points, 36 points on a really good Nebraska defense, and
mhm.
starting to think that the juice might be real here.
Look, before we get into that side of things, we do need to clarify just how miserably bad Nebraska is on offense.
Yes, they're very bad.
Because I think if you took the TCU offense and the Nebraska defense right now in this moment, that'd be a pretty dang good football team because
Yeah.
Nebraska looked very good defensively against Colorado to start this game. I think they
Yeah.
ran out of juice at a high altitude, especially in the second half, because they could not move the ball on offense at all. And
Yeah.
those defenders played, I think, upwards of 80 snaps in that Colorado altitude. That's tough to do. And then when you're doing it against a Colorado offense that we now have definitive proof is very athletic,
Yes.
incredibly fast, they understand how to play into their strengths as an offense. They've got a guy calling plays for them who is very smart about putting them in
So good.
positions to succeed.
Yeah.
That's a recipe for disaster if you're an opponent, and that was the case for Nebraska on Saturday. Colorado 36, Nebraska 14, and it didn't even feel that close.
Yeah.
It really didn't. I
I,
watched pretty much every snap of this game, and Colorado kind of controlled it from the jump and just did their thing and moved on.
Yeah. It took them a little while to get that offense rolling. Like, like you said, they didn't come out right out of the gate and put points on the board. But once they got into that rhythm, man, it starts rolling downhill. And Dion, to his credit, man, he's got those guys believe it. I mean, my favorite thing that came out of this game is that Shedeur Sanders, Deion Sanders, talking about all the disrespect that was being shown and
Yeah.
how Colorado Matt Rule disrespected them. But the quote that they were using, Matt Rule never mentioned the word Colorado at all. But there was a quote from the spring where he talked about he wasn't going to build his team through the transfer portal. And Dion got those boys to believe that that was a direct shot at them, which to me is just like that is just, man, like this dude, when you talk about being able to sell ice to
That's
someone in Antarctica, like
that's
he's
Kirby.
got it.
That's Kirby Smart levels of motivation
Yeah.
of you are being disrespected right there.
Yes. Unbelievable.
Very, very good job by Dion. I loved his critique of Shador's primetime dance and zone
Yeah.
dance. Said he didn't get his feet high enough. Said it was horrible. Meanwhile, Shador thought it was better than his dad's version.
And he was flashing the rollie at the Nebraska players because they were warming up on the Buffalo on the field. Like,
yeah.
And then he ran out of gas, like on his way home too, and like posted a TikTok from the side of the road. So like the Colorado is a reality television show that might actually be real. And I don't know how to deal with it. Like I'm like, I wanted to hate this. I wanted it to be like watching a car crash. I am in love with this team. Like they are so fun to watch. They are Miami of the early 90s. Like they are the bad boys of college football. And I don't know if they do as much cocaine.
Well,
I hope
probably not. Probably not.
More,
weed is
probably
legal.
more
weed is
weed.
legal.
Yeah. But I mean they are disruptors, right? And for a sport that has been it's so in flux, to have somebody that's able to legitimately come in and kind of shake stuff up. Like I'm becoming a believer. Now they'll get Colorado State, they get game day and big noon Saturday, which is the most hilarious thing in the entire world for a game featuring Colorado State. But then the Pac-12 slate gets a little
then they
real.
get Oregon and USC, and we get to see like they're really going to be put to the test, and I'm excited to see how that goes for them.
Yeah. And how do they handle if it doesn't go well? Because I unfortunately watched a lot of the USC Stanford game, and yeah, we won't talk about that. That's not on our list, so we can skip right past that one.
Yeah, we're gonna move right past that to the next score that I wanted to touch on is Miami 48, Texas A&M 33, and it was like going in a time machine for Miami. They were throwing the football all over the place against an A&M secondary that just I mean, look, if you're going to hire DJ Durkin as your defensive coordinator, you better have a good
Yeah, with
defense. And
Reap. So yeah,
tough
it's
scenes there. Bobby Petrino's offense looks a lot like Jimbo Fisher's offense as well. And you know that they're going to get questions all week about who's calling plays and who's really dictating what they do on offense and all that kind of stuff too.
the thing to me that's most like, if I'm a Texas A&M fan, which thank God I'm not, but if I was, like, the worst part of this is Tyler Van Dyke had all day to throw. They could get absolutely, and again, like, Mario Cristobal is an offensive lineman, right? So his offensive line, is going to be good, but he had all day to throw, and Texas A&M has literally collected 4 and 5-star defensive linemen for the past 5 years.
Yeah.
And could not get to the quarterback against a Miami team that was very bad. I mean, they lost to Middle Tennessee State last year. This was not, and they did some portal replacement, but it's not like they remade the entire team on the fly here. This is a lot of the same guys. They got coached up better. They were more prepared. They've had more focus on the trenches, but at the same time, like, if you're A&M, you've been paying all these guys and recruiting all of these guys. You got to be pretty concerned that you could not beat Miami's offensive line.
You should be. And that's that. To be fair to Miami, that was a point of emphasis for them. This offense was, how are they going to rebuild that? How are they going to grow some guys up? I think they did hit the portal a little bit when it came to offensive linemen specifically, and they obviously did a very good job of putting that thing together. But I mean, if you're Texas A&M right now, you're looking at your schedule thinking, like, goodness, like, are we gonna lose 6-7 games again this year?
Yeah.
Even after rebuilding our whole assistant staff essentially in the offseason. Next up, the team that
do we have to do this?
We do have to do this because I have a question for you, and I think I know the answer. I know what my answer is. Texas 34, Alabama 24. Texas looked legit against an Alabama team that, frankly, has not been the same Alabama team we got used to for about a decade. Still probably a top 10 team in the country, but not the definitive number one like they had been for so long under Nick Saban. I really have two questions for you. Did this game feel this? I'll start with this one. Did this game feel the same or different from Texas's win over Notre Dame a couple of years ago, where everyone also thought at that point, oh, Texas just beat Notre Dame. It was a great back and forth football game. This is the final signal that they are actually truly back.
I mean, I wanted this to be that game because I'm trying to remember what Notre Dame's record ended up being in 2016.
Like 6-6 or
4
something.
And 8. No, they went 4-8. So, and Alabama's not going to go 4-8 because the one thing Alabama does is they stack depth in a way that even Notre Dame isn't able to do. And so, Alabama's not going to be 4-8, but Alabama might be 10-2, 9-3, which is the equivalent of being 4-8 at Notre Dame, I think. So I hope that it's that game. But this is the thing I will say. I think Texas is good. They looked prepared in a way we haven't seen under the previous 2 regimes. They had a game plan that very specifically attacked Alabama's weaknesses, and they were able to execute that game plan at a high level. They didn't look like world beaters, but they looked excessively competent and very, very talented, which is probably enough to win them the Big 12. I think all of that talent they've been collecting, it's kind of like we were just saying about A&M. The difference is that Texas now has a plan for how to use it.
Yeah.
And they were able to execute that plan at a very high level. I don't think Alabama is going to be a playoff team. Alabama's probably not even going to play for an SEC championship this year would be my guess. I think they're going to lose 2 to 3 games, but you still went into Tuscaloosa in that environment against a program that is the bluest of bloods in this century, right? And looked like the better team for all 4 quarters. And you made another I think Jalen Milroe obviously has a lot of raw edges, but you also made him look really, really bad. And the Quinn Ewers was awesome against a talented, deep defense. Like, he did what he needed to do. I'm not going to say, I won't say that because I think it might be your second question, but I don't think Texas has arrived, but I think what they've done now is they've put the foundation that they can build upon, right? And now you got to stack wins. They're still going to lose one dumb game this year because they are still Texas, but this is a team that looks like it will be ready to matriculate to the SEC in a year. And that's, I think, for Texas fans, I wouldn't start throwing around the Texas is back moniker, but I'd start to say, oh, there's competency in this program now. to go with the talent collection we've been able to do for the last 20 years.
Kansas plays in Austin this year, so just
Oh, thank God.
mark
We got
that on
that
your
one.
calendar. No, I was not going to ask you if Texas was back because that's a worn out thing to say. I will say, and you can vouch for me here. I've said this for years and years and years when it comes to the University of Texas. I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
I'll
100%.
believe that the talent is there. I'll believe that the competency and the coaching is there when I finally see a semi-finished, mostly finished product on the football field. We saw a mostly finished product on the football field on Saturday night in Tuscaloosa. That's just a fact, right? And my second question is more about the decline of Alabama as a dynasty, because I think that when a program is so good for so very long, the decline can almost be shocking, even if it happens slowly over time. And I think we're in like year 2 or year 3 of a real decline of Alabama football, because that offensive line play from Alabama on Saturday night was nowhere near the standard that we are used to seeing from Alabama. Nowhere near it. And that was part because of the talent that Texas has accumulated up on their defensive front. Yes, they got some really good pressure on Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe has a lot of deficiencies, especially throwing a football. But that offensive line did not hold up for Alabama pretty much the entire night. And that's just not something we are used to seeing from Crimson Tide teams. And I wonder if, much like the decay of a society starts with various things here and there, does the decay of a dynasty start with within the trenches? And if the line play on both sides of the football for Alabama is not going to be at Alabama standard, I think we're going to start to see, maybe over the rest of this season and over the next couple seasons, Alabama football take a dip. And who knows what happens with Nick Saban after that? He's getting up there.
Well, and I think that's the thing is that it's not just that Alabama has taken a dip a little bit, which I think you're 100% accurate in saying, but it's also that other programs have the resources to catch up a lot more quickly. And we've seen what Georgia has done. We've seen, Ole Miss obviously hasn't won at that level, but they're able to recruit at a very, very high level. LSU has had some very quick success a year ago. We'll see what happens this year. But you see a team like TCU, get to the national championship game. Like, it's very easy to buy your way to the front of the line if you have the resources in place, or to get like kind of catch lightning in a bottle in a way that wasn't true even just 3 to 5 years ago. And so the advantage that Alabama had for so long is kind of being negated by NIL and the transfer portal. I can't, and I was trying to find the exact number, and I don't want to like throw some inaccuracies here, but I saw something over the weekend on Twitter where like Saban was like 13-0 or 18-0 against former assistants, like to start, and he's like 3-3 since. And so his coaching tree is kind of finally caught up to him as well too, I think, which is a big part of that. Sark obviously spent time on Saban's staff in Alabama. So, but I think you're right. I think that just the complexity of this Texas team and just the completion at each level that they have, offense, defense, special teams, depth, coaching, like they do have all the pieces. Now, that being said, after this win, anything less but winning the Big 12 is a total failure of a season, right? Like, I think that's empirically true.
Yeah, I think so.
They've never done it. So they've not done it in the modern era.
Since 2009. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is that ultimately becomes the question is, do you want this to be the pinnacle of your season, or do you want this to kickstart a special season? Texas could easily be a playoff team at this point. They can probably lose a game and still be a playoff team. And they're not going to have a lot of challengers, at the very tip top of the Big 12. But what we've seen the previous, 12 years is they don't need a tip-top challenger. They just need to keep focused for 12 games, and that's something they've not been able to do.
Yeah. Here's a pop quiz for you, and then we're going to move on to the next topic. Which happened more recently? And you already know the date for one of these, at least. Texas winning the Big 12, or the last time Alabama lost at home to a non-conference opponent?
I'm going to guess Texas winning the Big 12. I bet it's been a long time since Alabama's lost at home to a non-con.
Texas won the Big 12 in 2009. The last home non-conference loss for Alabama was Louisiana Monroe in 2007. Nick
Right.
Saban's first year.
First year. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Nick Saban's first
Crazy.
year there. It's the last time they had a non-conference loss at home. So Texas doing some things that haven't been done in a minute to the Crimson Tide.
Let's move on from having to say nice things about
Yes.
Texas and say just terrible things about Texas Tech and
Disparaging things
Baylor.
about other teams in the state.
Yeah.
Texas Tech and Baylor are both 0-2. It's a real shame.
So sad.
Let's start with Baylor and Utah because neither of these teams looked very good. Both were playing backup quarterbacks. Neither backup quarterback looked like they really had any sense of which way was up.
How the heck does Utah have a walk-on at QB? I mean, this has been a program that's been consistently.
They've got a redshirt freshman who is still pretty raw. They're not wanting to run him out there all the way. They did in the fourth quarter and ended up scoring 2 touchdowns in the last 2 minutes of the game to eventually win this football game. But I think for Utah, they did dumb things throughout the game because they were trying to force the passing game when in reality, just run the football, right? It's the same
Baylor
thing we said with TCU against Colorado. It's like just run the football. It was working, and it worked even better when they put the freshman kid in there whose name is escaping me at this moment, and he had a really good second half of the fourth quarter there to help Utah win. Baylor now has losses to Texas State and Utah on their ledger. There are a lot of conversations about Dave Aranda that are happening right now. Some concern that he might not make it through the end of the season. What's going on there? That's pretty concerning. Very different 0-2 situation, I think, from what Texas Tech is facing right now. They lose in overtime on the road to Wyoming. That was a tough loss. They get, I'll be honest, I had them +6 against Oregon. That was probably the worst beat I've faced in a while.
Yeah, that's a bad beat.
Because they were playing, they were going toe-to-toe with Oregon, who had just put up 81 points on their FCS opponent, Portland State, the week prior. They looked very good. That crowd in Lubbock was going crazy.
Yeah.
And then Tyler Shuck misses an open guy over the middle, doesn't see him, takes a hit, throws the ball. It's pick 6, and they end up losing the game 38-30, even though they were down 31-30 with 35 seconds left. And that +6 would have covered, would have been pretty dope. But it didn't. And life is pain and has no meaning.
This is why I don't bet on sports, Jamie. This is the reason. I will say Texas Tech, the loss at Wyoming is bad, but you can kind of give it as it's an away game. It's a look ahead game. I watched a lot of both of these games, like much to the detriment of my sanity and mental health. Texas Tech is going to be a problem for people. Mm-hmm. Are they going to make it to a Big 12 championship game? I don't know. Would I be surprised if they did? Not whatsoever. Nobody's going to like playing them. And that Thursday nighter in Lubbock hanging over our heads, I feel really badly about that right now. They were, it felt like they were getting dominated at times, and they were never out of that game until the final seconds. They can score so quickly. And honestly, they would have won that game if McGuire had not gone for it on 4th and 3 in their own territory. I think they would have legitimately won that game. That was, and it's lived by the fourth quarter attempt. Mm-hmm. Or 4th down attempt, die by the 4th down attempt. But man, if he just used a little bit of, just a touch of common sense, like I love the aggressiveness, but just added a touch of common sense and game management there.
You know what they call a person who changes his game plan when situations get tight?
A loser?
A coward.
Coward.
You don't stop going for it on 4th down. If going for it on 4th down is your bread and butter the whole season last year. I mean, they had one of the highest 4th down conversion rates in the country last season, and they went for it more often than not last season. I understand that, like, that's a moment that cost them a little bit of leverage, especially in the field position battle. I mean, you don't throw a pick 6 in the final minute. You probably are moving the ball down the field. You move the ball all year or all day, and you get a field goal, you win the game. So
I think that's one of the questions and things that I've kind of heard is around coaching circles is, Joey McGuire is so good at so many things, but when it comes to the in-game situations, was he going to be able to adjust? And you're right. They went for, like, last year, this year, 2 totally different things. They had no expectations last year. Now you've got that all on film and what you're going to do and what you're going to watch. I still love the aggressiveness, like I said, but I wish there was some situation kind of just common sense put in there. And I think based on my Twitter feed, which somehow has a lot of Texas Tech fans in it, I think there was some agreement, but you're right. Like, you are who you are, and you have to be consistent with who you are. And eventually the odds are going to probably be in their favor when it's all said and done. And it does get his guys excited to play. So it's hard. It's easy to second guess from from the couch, right? But
Yep.
that is the team that they want to be. They've consistently been, and it worked for them quite a bit last year.
Look, this is what you get for interacting with gambling gauchos on Twitter.
So true.
This
It's
is
so true.
same
This
things
ruined
happen to me.
everything.
Same things happening to me. TCU's next opponent, Houston. We're going to break them down later in the week. You sat down with Go Cougs to talk about this matchup, but they fall to 1-1 on the season after a double overtime loss at Rice.
Yeah. So a double overtime loss that they only got to overtime because after going 28 to nothing in the first half.
They got down 28 to nothing. They come back. Yeah.
Here's the thing that's really interesting, and I don't want to spoil too much of the interview ahead, but we always think of Dana Holgorsen and kind of that air raid tree, but what he's been trying to build at Houston is more of a ground and pound. As the Go Cougs correspondent said, 3 kneels downs and a cloud of dust is the offense that they've been trying to run here for the last couple of years. They brought in the right quarterback to do so with Donovan Smith, like that. He's the perfect QB to run that offense. But when you're going to fall down 28 to nothing, and you need him to throw you back into the game,
it's tough.
It's tough. Now, he did it to his credit, but at the end of the day, that is a very disheartening loss. And like, let's give Rice some credit. They've got a former Power 5 quarterback who I think has played at every Power 5 team in the country, and JT Daniels.
Sidebar. Can you explain to me how JT Daniels is still eligible to play college football, but Tez Walker is suspended for a season?
No. You know why? Okay. Because the NCAA sucks. They have Luke McCaffrey, who is a really talented player. He's part of the McCaffrey family tree. So like, it's not like Rice is devoid of talent. It's a quality team, but Houston cannot lose that game in their first season in Big 12. That is a devastating loss. And like we mentioned, maybe the reason that they aren't apparently sold out, according to what I was told today by Go Cougs.
And just for anybody who hears what I just said in the podcast, it's like, well, the rules changed after JT. The rules changed after Tez Walker transferred too.
Yeah.
He was supposed to be
constantly changed.
Like, listen, anyways, I'm not going to get on that soapbox tonight. We're actually making good time right now.
Yeah. So soapbox, I do want to get on.
Hammer this home field soapbox.
As we are recording, it is Monday night. It is 6:49 Pacific, and I have an email from Home Field Apparel telling me my bomber jacket will be delivered before 9 p.m. this evening. And when I say that I am so excited for this piece of clothing, now it's 97 degrees today. So when am I going to wear it? I don't know. That's a problem for another day.
It's hotter in North California than it is in Texas right now. It's 84 here.
North California.
North California.
Well, it's currently 80.
NorCal.
89. NorCal. Thank you. But Home Field Apparel, man, like we talk about this every week, just the absolute softest t-shirts and hoodies in the game, not just for TCU. You can get all of the gear for your favorite schools. If your favorite school isn't TCU, let's have some questions. But if it is, they've got some of the best throwback logos. I mentioned I was with my niece. I was wearing the Riff Ram frog, the sweater frog, and she kept pointing to it and going, "What's that?" And I'd say, "That's Go Frogs." And she'd go Frogs. So it's corrupting the youth in the best possible way. But constantly, right. Yeah. You've got the Give 'em Hell TCU, the basketball frog, which is a great shirt. But some of the softest, highest quality, just coolest looking gear around, joggers, quarter zips, bomber jackets. They started doing these special boxes now for games matchups that I'm so jealous of, and I desperately want them to release for TCU. So when they do release it, or anytime you want to pick up something from homefieldapparel.com, be sure to use our code FROGSIN15, FROGSIN 15 for 15% off your first purchase, 10% off your second purchase and beyond. FROGSIN15, save yourself a little bit of money, get yourself some home field apparel. Be very happy and content for when fall eventually does come, that you will be geared out in the best and softest sweatshirts, hoodies, joggers, et al. For your game day pleasure.
All of it. And your non-game day pleasure.
And your non-game day.
It's not game day right now.
7 home field shirts a week, I feel like. So
there you go. It's good to do. We recommend it. Highly recommend it. Most of the last thing I want to touch on before we wrap up this episode, though, is some very interesting news that Seth Davis reported earlier on Monday. Seth Davis, for those of you that maybe don't know, is a national basketball reporter. He is now with The Messenger, which is a new publication that I'm not completely familiar with.
I was not even aware that that's where he was now. Wow.
Yeah,
All
I mean,
right.
I realized it when I clicked the link on his tweet earlier today because I still
Wow.
click on people's links on Twitter. I don't just retweet articles without reading
Yep.
them, but that's
Same.
another soapbox for another day. Fox Sports is trying to coordinate a postseason college basketball tournament in Las Vegas featuring teams from the Big 12, the Big 10, the Big East, and prior to all of the chaos, they were trying to work with the Pac 12 as well. That would take all of the top teams from those conferences who don't make the NCAA tournament and have a tournament in Vegas. And
Wow.
I retweeted Seth's article today and just said, this already exists. It's called the NIT,
Yeah.
and it's actually better than playing in Vegas because teams get to host games
Yep.
and then they get to go play in Madison Square Garden, like
Which is awesome.
arguably the pinnacle of the sport of basketball in America. And that's a pretty cool consolation prize for a team not making the NCAA tournament. But according to this article by Seth Davis, this would be a requirement for the teams from those conferences who are selected to play in this tournament. Like they would not be able to accept an invitation to the NIT. They would have to go to this tournament instead. And that just feels really, really weird to me that there's a TV media company who's trying to create a postseason tournament outside of the college basketball NCAA structure.
It does feel like this is less of an opportunity to try to kill the NIT, the CBI, and more of a putting the structure in place to move away from the NCAA in the near future. I think that's 100% accurate. I think you bring up a good point. I think we like the NIT. I think fans like the NIT. I think teams like the NIT. If you're not going to play in the NCAA tournament, I got to watch TCU play Texas in Madison Square Garden. It was Fred Van Vliet was in my seat, and I had to kick him out. It was really cool. Like it was an amazing experience. But
what's
also,
Texas going to do? What's Texas going to do with their NIT appearances banner? If they can't play in the NIT, well, I guess they're moving to the SEC, and the SEC isn't a part of this, so they can still go to the NIT all they want.
so that's good. I think if this goes through, it will kill the NIT.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah, and I think it's obviously that this is Fox, and like I hate it, but also like wow, Fox, that's pretty smart. Fox has made some really shrewd sports moves here the last couple of years. I think it just again solidifies the fact that we're moving away from the NCAA controlling the major sports, and we're moving to more of an independent. I mean, it's going to be a semi-pro to legitimately like an actual pro league. They'll still wear the uniforms that say Alabama and Texas and TCU, but at the end of the day, those entities won't really be a part of the university system. It's going to be interesting to see what that does to the academic side of this, if that's even going to matter. Are you going to enroll kids in classes, or are you just going to have people play for the TCU professional football team and the TCU professional basketball team? 2030 is kind of the next like dead drop here, and all of these organizations that are putting the kind of the foundation in place in order to be ready for when the shoe does eventually fall are going to just be eating up gobs and gobs of cash. And moves like this just make it seem more and more likely, if not assuredly, that we are moving to a direction that will completely change the way we look at college athletics.
Absolutely. This is what this is they're testing those waters to see how this goes. I have a mantra when it comes to college realignment that all leaks are intentional. And I wonder if this is a float to see how, kind of the public opinion of this. Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it confusion? To see, all right, if we go forward with something like this, like what will be, how will it be received by people who we want to be consumers of this sports content? And I don't know how I feel about it yet. I'll be completely honest with you. But I also know that for the betterment of TCU, maybe that I would prefer TCU to be in than out.
Yeah.
When all of this stuff shakes out, because I think what we're heading towards, and if you listen to anything that they've said on Split Zone Duo for the last 2 years, they've said for the last couple years that this is kind of where this thing is headed. If your team's not a part of this, what's going to happen to all of those athletics programs? because
Yeah.
there's going to be a significant funding disparity, and you're probably going to see a lot of reduced Olympic sports programs at schools that are outside of this new structure, whatever it ends up looking like. So
The gulf between the haves and the have-nots is only going to widen over the next 5 years.
Yeah. Next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be pretty crazy to see how things shake out. I know that there's at least one more conference probably on the Atlantic coast that's not going to exist anymore, similar to the Pac-12. So
yeah.
We'll see how it all shakes out. But this is definitely a signal that all of the people who said things were going in this direction were right. And we're going to see how that all shakes out now and here in the coming years. But Melissa, I think that'll do it for this episode of Frogs Insider. Thanks to everybody that listened. We appreciate you greatly. Make sure that you've hit that subscribe button on YouTube. We're over there at Frogs Insider. Make sure that you've liked and left a review wherever you get your podcasts. Share this episode with a friend if you think that they need to hear our analysis of TCU's win over Nicholls, or if they want to hear us talk trash about Texas Tech and Baylor. Send them this episode. Send it to a Tech friend. Send it to a Baylor friend. Let them hear us disparage their beloved teams. We have no qualms with that. They can still use our home field code to get TCU gear when they eventually convert.
Yeah, we would love to have it.
Yes. So we will be back on Thursday morning with our Houston preview. I'll be doing another mailbag. Melissa, as we've mentioned a couple of times, sat down with Go Cougs folks to preview that football game. So we'll have that for you as well. So look forward to that. And until then, go Frogs.
Go Frogs.